Welcome, and we're so glad that you all are joining us. I am Megan Phillips of the Train with Trust Project, here with Jody Ambrose, also of the Train with Trust Project, and we are joined by Dr. Sue Dyson, who is a world-renowned equine orthopedist, veterinarian, author, speaker, and we are doing these series of conversations with Dr. Dyson, and today is actually our 25th of these discussions that we've done. So I'm going to pop up a PowerPoint screen so everybody can see something of a little bit more interest and get some information if you want to get your pens and pencils or have your device wherever you take down your notes handy, because we'll have some information on the screens that will probably be helpful for you. So just going to go ahead and share my screen here as we get started. And again, and Jody and I are with the Train with Trust Project, and we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to making sure that animal behavior education is accessible to everyone, and providing information about evidence-based training and animal care practices. So we've been doing these conversations. Like I said, we've done 25 of them so far. We're a nonprofit organization, so if you like the work we're doing, if you've been enjoying some of the resources that we have freely available on our websites, feel free to make a donation to help keep our work going. And we do have an announcement of Dr. Sue Dyson has a new course that she has been working on. Hold on here, we somehow got to the end of this. We're gonna skip back up to the top. Preview. Dr. Sue, would you like to talk about your new course that you have that you're partnering with Horses Inside Out?
Yes, this is a course that is going to start with a webinar introducing once again the Ridden Horse Pain Ethogram, or the Ridden Horse Performance Checklist, with lots of practical advice about how to actually apply it. And then that's going to be followed up by approximately 30 video recordings of different horse rider combinations that you will be able to watch in your own time, first muted so that you can make your own assessments about the horse and the rider, and then you can listen to my commentary about the horse, the rider, the tack, and various other things. And then we're going to conclude with another webinar which will be free for question and answers. So I think it's going to be a really unique course, and I think it would be invaluable to anyone interested in ridden horses.
Excellent. And so you all can see there, Horses Inside Out has been very generous to have a special offer for our followers and those who are participating in these conversations, that you can get 15% off of that course. And I was surprised how truly affordable this course actually is, but you can get an even better price with that coupon code TWT15. So jot that down and go take a look at that course. It's going to be really great. So today we're going to be discussing a topic, footing, which I know next to nothing about with my background, but I've been so interested to hear so many details that apparently so many other folks may not know as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Jody to head up the discussion. I'll be in the background. I'll be taking any questions or comments in our comments section here, and we'll try to address those questions about footing after our conversation. So with that, I will hand things over to Dr. Sue, or to Jody and Dr. Sue,
Yeah,
to everyone.
I'll start. So, okay, thank you, Megan. And this topic is, I think, one that seems deceptively simple. There's a lot of information out there about footing, and everybody who has ever ridden a horse has experience with footing. And I think everybody who's ever ridden a horse has a different opinion about footing. It seems like sometimes if you want two people to agree on something, you ask a third person their opinion on footing, and the two people will agree they're wrong. So there, we want to try to ask Dr. Dyson about what are some fundamental aspects of understanding the surfaces we ride on and the choices that we make surrounding that, so that we can kind of find some places to agree about that, because it really does vary quite a bit based on a lot of different factors. I work with riders that board at different facilities that have, they can choose which facility based on the footing. Those facilities make choices about how to build arenas and how to maintain their arenas, if they have groomed arenas. Some places don't, and some people don't ride on groomed footing, so that's something we'll get into. So when they are building a surface for riding purposes, people go to contractors, and those contractors oftentimes are not horse people and don't know the answers to some of their questions about what's best for a horse. And horse people generally are not contractors. And so, the answers that they get may or may not make sense, or they may have ideas about things that they have heard from other people. And it's a lot of times I see contractors and facility owners disagree about what's best. And there really isn't a be all end all arbitrator for that. So we're going to try and give you some principles to understand so that you have the tools to make these decisions. Whether you're choosing a facility, choosing an arena, choosing to build an arena, any of those things. And another factor is there's all kinds of surfaces that you can purchase. There's companies that are marketing their amendment or surface as the best. And it's important to understand how each of those materials functions in order to decide what's best for your particular situation. Whether it's just the least expensive, most expensive, or something in between. So we're just trying to demystify this topic a little bit, I think, with some just concrete information. Dr. Dyson, you and I have talked a little bit about sort of a turning point on this topic, which was the Olympics in Athens, where there were some injuries happened, and it was where some of the decision making, I think, took a sharp turn. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that and what happened?
Well, there were a number of pretty catastrophic injuries to show jumping horses, which happened on an artificial surface. So these were predominantly soft tissue injuries. For example, partial rupture of a superficial digital flexor tendon, which is an injury that can occur in an older show jumping horse, but is pretty unusual. But it was because there was a cluster of injuries, all of which were pretty severe, that stimulated research work. And I would be the first to say, I am not an expert on footing, but I have talked to a lot of people, and I do know very, very well Lars Rostov from the University of Uppsala in Sweden, and he is the go-to man in terms of knowing most of what there is to know about footing and the relative advantages and disadvantages of different surfaces. And he has done a prodigious amount of work in association with an engineering colleague that he met in the United States. So he has a van which has connected to it all sorts of electrical devices, and they have an artificial foot that is specially designed so that it can be dropped from a big height and land on the ground, and to simulate a horse landing. So the whole way the foot is designed, and it's weighted and full of electrical recording devices too, enables them to tell about how that foot is impacting with the ground, how the ground is cushioning the landing of that foot or not, what forces are being transmitted up through the foot, how the foot interacts in terms of sliding or not sliding with the surface. So they have been instrumental in developing a huge amount of knowledge about how to test arena surfaces. And then there are other people who have worked with grass footing, and that's particularly relevant to the racing industry, looking at the way in which specifically designed probes can measure the depressibility effectively of the grass surface. I think that what I've learned speaking to these experts is that if you ask them, what's the ideal footing for dressage? What's the ideal footing for show jumping? They don't actually know the precise answers, because the way in which the horse's feet impact with the ground is associated with all sorts of different things. It's going to depend on the speed of the horse, how it's turning, whether it's shod or unshod, the limb flight, its conformation, the direction in which it's moving. And so it's not a straightforward question to answer. And it appears that it is not the materials of the footing per se that are necessarily the most important factors. It is the property of those surface materials. And that relates to not just the top layer, the layer you see, but all the layers underneath that. So constructing an arena is not just putting down a layer on top of grass or anything. It's really important that it's designed from the bottom up with adequate drainage, and the different layers and the different thickness of the layers are all going to influence how the horse's feet impact with the arena. So shall we go to the first slide? I've ridden on lots of different arenas, and I can remember also when I was training event horses properly, quite a long time ago now, I used to have the opportunity during the pre-season to do all my fitting work on the gallops in Newmarket. And the gallops in Newmarket comprise all sorts of different surfaces. So you have grass gallops, you have all-weather wood chip gallops, you have what was called the albahatry, which was a rubber and sand gallop. And it was fascinating to see how the horses responded in different ways to the different surfaces. And there was no doubt that you got the most kind of rebound from what was the albahatry, which was the rubber mixed with sand. And the horses all seemed to enjoy that surface the best. But if we just look at this horse we can see it's on a 10-meter diameter circle, and you can see that the right front foot is not going to land flat. It's going to land at an angle. The outside part of the wall is going to land slightly before the inside part of the wall. And that often happens. And when the foot strikes the ground has got to offer sufficient grip, because we don't want the horse to slide. Sliding results in loss of confidence of the horse, and sliding also will result in dissemination of forces through the limb in a rather abnormal way, which is not ideal. Let's go to the next slide, because this is going to show a kind of simplified diagram. Oops, we've hopped the diagrams, yes. So we've got 3 diagrams. So we're going to go from left to right. So in the far left, the foot is making impact with the ground. And we don't want the foot to be abruptly stopped. It's got to slide a little bit forwards, but not too much. So we've got to have adequate traction and grip. And the surface has got to offer enough support so that the foot doesn't sink too much into the ground. It wants to go in a bit, so the surface is providing some cushioning, but it doesn't want to go in too far. And then in the middle picture, we've got the stance phase. So this is when all the horse's weight is being transmitted through the 2 loaded limbs, in this instance, the left fore and the right hind in trot. And then we've got forces, which will be equal and opposite, going back up the leg. And the impact of the forces going back up the leg is going to be influenced by the firmness of the surface and how much rebound it gives. And then in the picture on the right, the foot is just about to roll over the toe and then push off. And again, we've got to have a little bit of give so the toe can go slightly into the ground, but the surface has also got to be firm enough so that the horse can grip a little bit and push off without the foot sliding too much. So let's go to the next slide. And here we can see imprints of horses' feet and shoes in a surface. So the things that we need to be looking at with respect to the surface qualities are, what is the impact firmness? If a surface is too firm, then we're going to have too greater magnitude of forces that are going to be driven up through the horse's limb. And if, for example, we're thinking about a horse landing over a jump and the forces that are placed on the front limbs, those forces could be tremendous. So you've got to have some degree of give to the surface, providing some cushioning and shock absorption. Then the surface has got to be able to provide some grip or traction so that it will allow the foot to slide a little, but not too much. And then the surface has got to be responsive. It's got to give that rebound effect. If it is too hard, you will get this kind of dead reaction. So the horse doesn't get any momentum, which is generated by the surface. And then it's really important from the horse's perspective that the surface is uniform. So it can anticipate how it's going to feel to land. Lack of uniformity within any form of surface is one of the worst things that you can have if you're doing any serious work. It doesn't matter if you're at the walk, but if you're doing anything else, uniformity of the arena surface is hugely important. Let's just go to the next slide. And this kind of gives you an example of how this horse is cantering, obviously, to the left. The left the leading forelimb is pushing off. It's not pushing off symmetrically, and the horse has got body lean to the left. So that the arena surface has got to be able to support that. If the arena surface was too loose, then that push off would be very ineffective and would also be detrimental to the horse. So it's all very well having a surface, but that surface has got to be maintained such that you have uniformity. So, for example, if you've got a sand and fiber surface, it's no good if all the fiber has gone to one end of the arena and the rest of the arena is sand. So you've got to regularly mix in the fiber with the sand in that top layer. So the type of equipment that you use for arena maintenance and the frequency with which you do it is important. And it's not just a matter of whizzing round on a little tractor, pulling some device. You've got to know how is the logical way to do it, and you've got to do it with care. So certainly Lars Rostov recommends that you select somebody who really is passionate about arena maintenance to do the arena maintenance. Don't just give it to the lowest person in the pecking order, because they probably won't do a good job.
In our case, we recently got a new barn manager who had an idea how to groom the arena, and unfortunately she was misinformed, and so it completely messed up the entire arena, and we asked the guy who cleans the stalls and feeds the horses to do it, and he fixed it. So it's like you said, it's whoever cares the most and has the most experience with doing it that and having it turn out well.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide, because there are all sorts of different devices for arena surfaces, and some former colleagues at the Animal Health Trust actually did some testing of a variety of different devices, and many of these devices can be set at different heights, so they have a different effect. The important thing is this done really regularly, ideally daily. And it's also important that the horse's droppings are removed from the arena surface as soon as possible, because wear and tear and degradation of the upper levels will be accelerated if droppings are left in the arena surface. So if you want your arena surface to be long lasting, then it really pays to remove the droppings as regularly as you can possibly do, because that's going to help you. And arena surfaces are not cheap, and therefore it's worthwhile taking that time. And I think one other important factor is it's no good you always training on, for example, this type of surface, and this was a sand and rubber surface, which was lovely to ride on, if you're going to be competing on a completely different surface. Because if a horse is not used to a surface, its gait is immediately going to change. And if you go from, for example, a sand and rubber situation like this to a sand and fiber surface, which is more compacted, you may immediately realize that the horse is tripping more than it normally would do, just because it is not accustomed to the arena surface. So it really pays to know what sort of surfaces you are going to be asking your horse to work on. So if you're going to a competition, which is on a surface which is completely different to what your surface is, then you need to prepare your horse. You also face a situation when, for example, you may decide that you're going for a 3-day clinic to your trainer. And if your trainer has a completely different surface to you, 3 days on a completely different surface, one with high work intensity, 2 with no recovery time effectively because it's on a daily basis, and 3 on an unaccustomed surface, that is a recipe for musculoskeletal injury. And if we want to prevent musculoskeletal injury, we must think about these things. 3 days of intense work is a lot if you're just working on the flat and you're not doing any form of cross training. And if it's 3 days of intense work on a completely different surface to which the horse is normally working on, that really is a potential injury predisposing situation. And if you are an event rider, when often, certainly in Europe, a lot of the dressage phase and certainly the jumping and cross country is on grass, then your horse must be used to working on grass. I was very interested to learn that Peter Fredriksson, one of the very successful international show jumping riders in Sweden, rides his horses a lot on grass because he feels that well-maintained grass is a very, very good surface. And also, he does not believe in doing his flat work predominantly within the confines of an arena, because he feels that the horses are turning too much, too frequently, and therefore he feels he can do his flat work, and he's very good at his flat work, with much less strain on the horse by doing it out in a huge field where he can be doing straight line work and then some gentle curbs, rather than constantly asking for turns within the confines of an arena. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it highlights how differently we condition horses for different disciplines as well, that, a lot of what you're saying would seem pretty obvious to an event trainer or rider because you're going to be competing on different surfaces. Whereas I think, if you, from a dressage person's perspective, just the thought of needing to cross train in order to go to a clinic for 3 days at a place that has a different kind of footing, I don't think that's something that a lot of people take into consideration, but it is very common to see, in my experience, to see injuries when a horse moves from one facility to another, and people don't take that into account.
Yeah, let's just go to the next slide, because I think it's a misconception that we should always be doing dressage training in an arena.
Mm-hmm.
Here we've got, these are 2 dressage horses. One's out in a wood, the other one's going up a hill. And that is important for dressage horses, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because they need to have a different mental situation. They need to have different footing. They need to, because think about a dressage horse. A dressage horse is not just going in straight lines. It's doing lots of circles. It's doing lots of turns. Like, for example, an advanced horse is doing canter pirouettes. It's doing half pass, and the loading on the limbs and the loading of the back is very, very different to that which is in straight lines. And the loading of the limbs requires the horse to be able to adjust its loading pattern by the way in which it feels that its feet are landing. So to be able to accustom the horse to be going on different footing is very advantageous. And also, I think some horses develop a better quality of movement by doing something like medium and extended trot outside the confines of an arena. I know that Ingrid Klimke enjoys riding her horses out in the snow because she feels it develops their paces, and she's doing it in straight lines.
Yeah, I grew up riding in the snow. It was always super fun because you could feel so much more articulation in a foot of snow than you would in the arena.
Yes, and let's go to the next slide. So this is just looking at a horse just walking over rough terrain. And people may say, oh, that's dangerous. But this is ideal for teaching horses how to learn to adjust the placement of their feet, having to learn how, if the foot doesn't land very squarely, it's developing the sense of position. And this is all automatic. So there are nerve impulses that go from the horse's foot up to the horse's brain, and then other nerve pulses that come down to the limb, which tells the horse how to position the feet. And that takes practice. So it's a little bit like, for example, you walk down the stairs in the dark and you miss the bottom stair and you kind of lurch forward and you feel this horrible sensation. You can avoid that by learning how to place your feet. And this is what horses can do by walking slowly over rough terrain like this. Mm-hmm. And this is good for any horse, including dressage horses. And some people will throw their hands up in horror, but I really believe that this is beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. As you're talking, I'm thinking about how many people I know who would say this is too dangerous and, it's too high risk. But basically what you're saying is that exactly the opposite, that this is critical for maintaining soundness, and that the reason horses get injured is often because people are not doing this.
Absolutely. And because horses suffer repetitive strain injuries, and repetitive strain injuries are the result of the limb being repeatedly loaded in a similar fashion. And that's what happens if you're going round and round and round within an arena. The limbs are being loaded in a very similar pattern all the time, which is one of the reasons I believe that we have this epidemic of suspensory ligament problems, mm-hmm. because the suspensory ligaments are being loaded in the same way all the time. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the data that we have about the demographic of the horses that experience suspensory injuries, the event horses have less because they're working on more varied terrain. They're doing more varied things, so they're loading the limbs in a more variable way.
I'm curious about that. Is there a difference in the amount of those kinds of injuries between, say, the US and UK, or the US and Europe? Because I think it's much more common to see this kind of riding on different surfaces where you are than compared to California, where I am, where there's not that much land.
Actually, there have been no good large-scale studies from the US that have looked at the distribution of suspensory ligament injuries in horses of different disciplines, or horses living in different parts of the USA, because obviously the conditions are very variable on the East Coast versus the West Coast,
right, and in between.
So unfortunately, there is a lack of good, reliable data from the US. So I can't answer that.
Okay, it'd be very interesting to know that, because, you know, living in an urban area in California, there's really not a lot of open space to go ride, and the surfaces are pretty tightly controlled. But I do see a lot of suspensory injuries, and I wonder how much of that is breeding, how much of it is training technique, how much of it is, you know, attributable to a lack of cross training.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that suspensory ligament injuries are multifactorial, but we certainly have seen clusters of injuries at specific yards, which we felt were related to the use of the arena and the absence of doing other work.
Yeah.
And when we made suggestions about how that should change in terms of more cross-training and better arena maintenance, then those clusters diminished. So I think that you can't say there's a single cause and effect for suspensory ligament injuries. I'm sure it's multifactorial, but I think that the arena footing and the use of arenas versus other surfaces is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like looking at the experiences of different disciplines, I was just thinking about horse racing and how many different surfaces they race horses on, and how much data they probably have in terms of how horses respond to these different surfaces. And it seems like there's a wealth of information out there if we looked at how these different populations compare.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the spectrum of injuries at US racetracks versus the UK, you will see quite a lot of difference, because all of our top races are on grass, and they're not within the confines of a racetrack as you know in the USA. They will be much more open racetracks, and so not constantly going again on a bend.
Right.
And there's been a huge amount of work done on surface footing, the banking of the tracks, the maintenance of the tracks in the USA, which has advanced things hugely compared to, say, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the spectrum of injuries that you see in thoroughbred racehorses in the USA is different to that which we see in the UK. So you have quite a lot of catastrophic breakdowns of the suspensory ligament and proximal sesamoid bone fractures, which are disasters. And we would very rarely see that type of injury. Mm-hmm. So that's related to the way in which the horses are both being trained and raced.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure that can be extrapolated in a lot of different ways to other disciplines.
Yes, I think that the work that horses do in an arena, because they're going more slowly than the racehorse, and because they are moving around more in the arena, it's not quite the same. So we don't think about banking in arenas, whereas you do at a racetrack think about banking. Mm-hmm. And that was something that was developed in Sweden by Ingmar Fredriksson, so the father of Peter. He was one of the very first people to do work with racetracks for both thoroughbreds and standardbreds. And he has a great legacy. Should we go just to the next slide?
Yeah.
So event horses have to be used to galloping on grass, and not just galloping on flat grass, going up and down hills as well. And they have to have sufficient traction. So we're thinking not just about the footing itself, which is going to be influenced by the amount of grass coverage and the nature of the grass and the nature of the type of ground, because some will be sandy ground, which is well drained, and others will be clay-based ground, which is much less well drained and tends to bake very quickly and dry out quickly. The horses have to be used to galloping on various different types of surfaces and up and down hill, and we have to also prepare the feet so they have adequate traction, because what horses hate is feeling insecure. So you will see the horse on the left has got big studs in the shoes in order to enhance grip. And those are only going to be in for the jumping phases, and for the dressage probably. But the choice of studs and the use of studs becomes very important when you are moving at speed on grass.
And you mentioned the amount of moisture in the grass, and I think we haven't really talked in depth about moisture and water and the impact that it has on footing. And that's where I am, where it's drought conditions, people tend to underwater sand footing or sand mixed footings. Obviously on grass, water is going to change the amount of grip. What are some other effects that moisture has on the surface that you need to take into account?
Well, I think it depends on the surface. And the really important thing is, if you're dealing with an arena, is that the entire arena is uniformly watered, because we've talked before about the importance of uniformity of the surface. And it's no good having a water sprinkler that does one area, which then gets loose and soft and doesn't deal with the rest of the arena.
Mm-hmm.
So adequate moisture is important. And there are alternatives to putting moisture on from the top down or from the bottom up. And that depends a little bit on what surfaces you've got and how much money you want to spend. But good arena maintenance requires some source of water. And certainly it's been my observations when I've visited Canada that there's a lot of very loose sand-based arenas that get very, very dusty. And the surfaces are not very horse friendly.
Mm-hmm. And you've talked about preparing the horse for variable surfaces. Obviously, in eventing, the surface is going to be different from one area of the course to another. So my assumption is that involves conditioning, but also shoeing or preparing the foot. Can you talk a little bit about footing for different kinds of, for shoeing, for barefoot, if those considerations make a difference?
I think that dressage horses can cope without shoes, assuming that they have got good conformation and good quality of movement. There are some horses, dressage horses, that if you look at their movement behind, they're a little bit unstable, and they often benefit from being shod. There is an increasing trend among show jumping riders to have some horses which jump barefoot. But those barefoot horses have a huge amount of attention to their feet. The feet are probably attended to by a farrier more frequently than with conventional shoeing. And in between competitions, the horse is not entirely barefoot. It has protective boots on. in order to preserve hoof wall. And some horses clearly move better and jump better without shoes, and some horses don't. And those that have tried it are very open-minded. They will try it with one horse, and if they feel it doesn't go so well, they'll put shoes back on, whereas the horse does apparently enjoy it and feels comfortable and jumps better. They will leave that horse barefoot, but with very, very regular intervention with the feet. So it's not just a question of taking off the shoes and the horse being completely barefoot. If you're just using the horse for trail riding, and the horse is adapted, and adaptation takes months, it's not something that happens overnight, then some of those horses develop a very hard hoof capsule, and they can accommodate to that trail riding without shoes, being completely barefoot and being barefoot all the time. But it is very much a matter of having time to adapt. And most competition horses will not be able to be completely barefoot all the time. And of course, even if you've got a dressage horse, and I'm advocating cross training, which I think is hugely important, the horse may be fine barefoot in the arena. It might not be fine barefoot hacking up a stony track, for example. So we have to consider all those factors. But that shouldn't stop you hacking up a stony track, because it's good for the horse.
Right. And on the flip side of that, can you talk about using studs for certain surfaces, obviously for grass?
Yeah, I mean, the studs that we use on grass are going to vary depending upon the ground and weather conditions. So if the ground is deep and potentially slippery, then we're going to be using bigger studs than if the ground is very firm, when we're going to be using much smaller pointed studs. And it's important to recognize that studs on very firm ground can have a huge impact on the way in which the horse lands. So if you just have a stud in the lateral, the outside branch of the shoe, then you're immediately going to unbalance the horse's foot, because it's going to be landing with the foot at an angle. So ideally, you need to have a stud on the inside and the outside in order to allow the horse to land more squarely. And then the downside of that is if the horse moves closely, and then it has the possibility of interference injuries caused by the inside stud abrading the opposite limb. So it's all a matter of a trade-off with all these things.
Well, and that brings up, in terms of, you mentioned interference, what are the most common behaviors that you see that would indicate a horse is struggling with the surface and needs something to change?
I think the most important things to recognize is if the horse is tripping or stumbling excessively, because that generally says, I'm struggling with this arena, and that often happens with arena surfaces that are non-uniform. So there's a soft patch somewhere, and the horse will not be prepared in its placement of its feet, so will stumble in that area. Or it may lose rhythm if the horse is consistently slowing down in one area because the footing has changed. So it brings us back to the uniformity being important.
And I assume as a vet, the best way to determine how much of a role the footing is playing is to observe the horse on different surfaces and see if that movement changes, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we lunge both on a soft surface and on a firm surface, because horses may change. Now, some firm surfaces, I think, are too firm because they're completely non-physiological and may induce the horse to shorten its step length just because it's being cautious, because it's a little bit frightened of slipping, because it's generating also such an impact through the limbs. So I'm not sure that is a very useful tool to be using.
Yeah.
I also would like to see maybe several horses work in an arena, so that you see whether or not it's that one individual horse that's struggling, or whether it's something which is a feature of the arena which is causing several horses to struggle. So if, for example, you're thinking about moving to a different barn, I would always advocate that you watch several horses work on the facilities that are available there so that you can see how they're coping with the arena.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think people tend to walk around and look at the ground, but they don't always observe multiple horses moving on the same footing to see if there's any common common behavior that seems to run throughout all the horses at a facility, or any indication that there's an issue related to the footing that comes up over and over again. So if you are new to this topic and you're not someone who's looking to, build an arena, you're not going to go out and hire a bunch of experts to advise you on putting in a new surface. These seem like practical ways that you could learn to evaluate and choose where you want to keep your horse and how you want to train them on various surfaces. So you would look for a facility that has access to more than one surface, look for a facility where the horses in general are going well on the same surface. Is there anything else that you would look for?
I think those are the majority. There is a helping hand. Let's go to the next slide, because there is an electronic version of this Equestrian Surfaces, a guide, which was produced in Sweden and translated into English, and is, I think, available via the FEI website. And this is a very comprehensive guide to surfaces. And although it's a very long document, I think it's about 60 pages, for each section, they have brief summaries of the key points, which I think is really user-friendly. And then there is an additional resource. The charity World Horse Welfare has a website, and that too has a document prepared by Dr. Rachel Murray all about arena surface and arena surface maintenance. And I think that is simpler, but both are, I think, very useful documents that can guide you through some of the more nuanced points. And this one, the Equestrian Surfaces, a guide, also has a big section on creating arenas and the input you need from various professionals.
That's fantastic. And you said that's available electronically on the FEI website?
I think so.
Okay. Well, Megan, do we have any questions?
Sorry, it takes a second to find the mute when it gets hidden behind all of these things. So I have not seen any questions pop up as I've been monitoring on my phone device. Sometimes through different accounts, I can see different comments pop up. So it's possible that there are some questions. And as we mentioned, if we're not able to answer anybody's questions live or have something to address, we definitely will follow up with you in the comments if there's something that needs an answer from us. So just to wrap up then, again, we are a nonprofit, and if you've been enjoying this, feel free to make a donation. And also, if you want to learn more about how to best apply the 24 behaviors, the Ridden Horse Pain Ethogram, and all of the movement and behavior information that lies behind that, and really become an expert, this course sounds like an amazing opportunity with a lot of really valuable information that should be helpful for everyone. So take advantage of that coupon code very generously provided by Horses Inside Out. Our friends over there are excited to help everyone be able to access that course. And coming up, we will do our next talk in May, on May 15th. We haven't selected a topic yet. If you all have a topic that you would really like to see discussed, please communicate with us on our social media. We are happy to provide information and answer questions that all of you have. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we will look forward to seeing you next month on Thursday, May 15th for further discussion. Thanks again, Dr. Dyson, as always, for being here and providing your wealth of knowledge for everyone to learn from you.
Welcome.